drink of this, all of you, for this is my blood, the mystery of love." On the day before he was put to death, Jesus celebrated the feast of the Passover with his apostles. This solemn feast was hundreds of years old. It commemorated the time when God had brought the Jewish race out of Egypt, where they were held in slavery. Another name given to the Passover was Feast of the Unleavened Bread. This was because on that day the Jews used bread made without leaven or yeast. The most important part of the Passover feast was a supper. It consisted of certain foods and of wine, which were eaten and drunk with special prayers and hymns. Jesus and his apostles came to Jerusalem to have their Passover supper. Nicodemus, a wealthy Jew, was a faithful friend of our Lord, loaned him a large upstairs room in his house, and John and Peter came ahead of the others to make supper preparations. Soon Jesus and the rest of the apostles arrived. It had been a hard walk along the dusty road, and they were very tired. But how glad they were to be celebrating the feast together! On entering the room, everyone removed his sandals, as was the custom, and then took his place at table. In eating the Passover supper, Jesus followed carefully all the rules of the Jewish religion. That religion had been given by God himself, and each prayer and each act of the Passover was a way of adoring his beloved Father in heaven. At one point, all at the supper had to wash their hands. When this was done, Jesus took off his cloak and tied a large towel around his waist. Then, filling a large basin with water, he began to wash the apostles' feet. The apostles were overcome with wonder that our Lord should thus act as their lowly servant. Many of them protested, and Peter most of all. Jesus insisted on finishing the humble task. When it was done, he said to them, "I, your Lord and Master, I have washed your feet. I did this to give you the example of serving one another, just as I have now served you." The feast was resumed. Jesus and the apostles observed all the beautiful old customs, praying, singing the praises of God, and offering specially prepared bread and wine to God in thanksgiving for his blessings. But when the meal was nearly over, Jesus showed by his manner that there was sadness in his heart. "Truly," he said to his friends, "one of you is about to betray me." At this dreadful thought, the apostles were very shocked. With trembling lips, each one asked, "Lord, it is I?" And Peter, who always acted very quickly, leaned over to John and said, "Ask the master who it is," for John was sitting next to Jesus. So John put a question to our Lord. "Lord, who is it?" "He to whom I shall give this piece of bread dipped in the dish," Jesus answered, but he spoke so quietly that none of the others heard him. In the center of the table at every Passover supper was a big bowl containing a thick syrup made of fruits that had been pounded and mixed with vinegar. The syrup was called charoseth, and into it the discs of unleavened bread or mazoth were dipped. When Jesus had answered John's question, he took a piece of bread, dipped it into the bitter-sweet syrup, and handed it to Judas. Judas stared. How did Jesus know that he was getting ready to turn it over to the chief priests? Judas was very frightened, but trying to seem as innocent as the rest, he asked boldly, "Is it I, Rabbi?" "Yes," Jesus answered. And looking at Judas for a minute, He added in low tones, "What you are about to do, do quickly." What Judas was about to do was to make plans with Jesus' enemies for his capture. So we see by these words to Judas how willingly our Lord gave himself up to suffer for us. Judas arose and hurried out. The other apostles still did not know of his guilt. They thought he had gone on some errand for the Master. The feast was now drawing to its close. The meats and herbs had been eaten. The last portions of bread and the last cups of wine were yet to be offered to God and consumed. But Jesus was about to institute his own great feast for the adoration of God, a wonderful banquet that will feed the very souls of men. He took one of the loaves of bread and blessed it, then breaking it into the pieces, he gave some to each of the apostles, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Next he took a cup of wine, and giving thanks to God, he blessed it and also gave it to them, saying, "Drink of this, all of you, for this is my blood." When they had solemnly partaken of the consecrated bread and wine, he added his final direction, "Do this in commemoration of me." This was the first Holy Mass, and it was because Jesus wanted all people to be able to share in this sacrament that he made the apostles his first priests. He did this when he told them, "Do this in commemoration of me." For these words gave them the power to change bread and wine into his body and blood, as he had just done. Now they could go forth to all the world and be second Christs. When Jesus and the apostles had recited the glorious psalms that give special praise to God, their last Passover supper was over. They all went out of the upper room and bent their steps to the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus wished to pray there, to beg from his Father to help for what lay before him, for he knew that he would be captured in the Garden of Gethsemane, and on that next day he would give up his life on the cross to redeem us all and open the gates of heaven to us. Thank you for listening to Catholic Kids Library. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to our channel to hear more. See you again soon. Bye!